Are they curating the news in good faith? Or are they doing it as part of a deliberate campaign of gaslighting?
Misinformation is everywhere. It's a massive problem. It's like a problem of our time. We need to fact check. We need to correct.
These kind of decisions about what information to show people on social media platforms, these are not being made by individual producers. These are being made by algorithms. Are we going to get into a world where it becomes impossible to convince anybody that anything is real?
Hey, we're Steve and Andrea from the Political Reality Podcast.
We're so excited you're here. Today, we have a great interview for you with Professor Joshua Tucker. He is the co-director of the Center for Social Media and Politics at NYU. And we're going to be talking about misinformation. It feels like it's everywhere. We talk about it all the time. It's certainly a big part of American politics and politics around the world. So we're going to dive in on what it is, what it isn't, how we measure it, and
what to do about it, if anything.
Yeah, and I think some surprising findings and recommendations, not your usual fact check recommendations.
Yeah, I was surprised.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, if you surprise Steve, I think you've really done something. We're super excited to share that with you, our first interview of the podcast. But before we do that, we thought we would dive into a small segment called Data Corner. You ready to get cornered by some data?
Absolutely.
Very good. So, Steve,
yes.
So I have some data that I'd like to run by you.
Okay.
And as your background in the medical profession, I think you may know more about this than many, but these days, prescription drug prices are in the news. Do you know how much more Americans pay on average for prescription drugs compared to, say, other developed countries?
Like European countries?
Yeah.
So on average, I think is the key word there. I know that there's a huge variance because we have drugs that are on patent and generic alternatives. Generic alternatives are pretty cheap. I would say on average, probably 50% more.
So research, and a lot of politicians these days are citing these numbers, but the most recent research that I find reliable comes from Rand Corporation, and it uses 2022 numbers. And according to those numbers, Americans on balance, depending on how you control for prices and whether we have coupons and rebates and those sorts of things, on balance pay between 200 and 300% of what Europeans, so 2 to 3 times as much as Europeans. So that's a lot. And that's a big talking point for the Trump administration. It's a big talking point for the Biden administration. It's one of the few things, actually, that Americans really agree on is drug prices are too high for prescriptions.
So is that the average of the drug price or the average of what people are paying for their total prescription burden?
So it depends. If it's total prescription burden, it can vary, but on balance, the prices are about 3x American prices.
All right.
And that's where the variation comes in. And of course, it's not taking into account the very complicated systems around American healthcare where some of us aren't really paying much because of our insurance and others of us are paying a ton because we don't have insurance. But this average, and I think you hit on this, is the average itself is a bit misleading. So it's not necessarily the case that, saying that Americans pay 3 times more than Europeans for prescription drugs on average makes it sound like every time I go to CVS and fill a prescription, I'm paying 30 and the French people are paying 10.
Yes.
The actual reality is that it depends a lot on drugs. And exactly as you said, generics are really cheap. And do you know if do you think they're cheaper or more expensive in Europe?
Probably, I would say the same or cheaper.
Yeah, so this same research from Rand Corporation finds that American drug prices for generics are 67% the price on average compared to Americans.
That makes sense.
Do you know what percentage, this is trivia night, do you know what percentage of prescriptions filled in the United States are for generics?
No, I've never really thought about that, the percentage. I think I know insurance companies prefer you use generics first. I think physicians who are cost-effective, mindful, know that we could start with the cheap stuff. There's no reason to go right for the super expensive on-patent new drug out there. But we do like to use the new shiny drug that is a little bit better than the older ones, or sometimes it's a lot better. So on balance, I would say maybe it's half.
So I was surprised by the numbers. So they're 90% of prescriptions filled. 90 to 91%. It's a bit of a debated number. And in Europe, it's actually only 40%. So we're actually a lot more generics.
It's not that much of an incentive.
It's not that much of an incentive.
Yeah.
That's right. So what this means is that if drug prices in the US are 3 times higher than in Europe, but our generics, which make up 90% of our prescriptions, are cheaper than in Europe, this leaves us with these shiny brand name drugs that you're describing that cost way, way more in the United States than in Europe.
Right.
And so those percentages, again, it kind of depends on how you measure it, but the brand name originals from this same data set come out at 422% of European prices. So we're paying way more for these expensive, cutting edge drugs. These are drugs that the patent hasn't expired. There's usually many, many patents, and those kind of are in a cascading state of non-expiring. But I did want to call attention to this in our data corner, because when we talk in politics about how it's 3 times the price, that is factually true. But it's also statistically misleading because many, many Americans are paying less than their European counterparts. And a few Americans, of course, these are maybe for rare diseases or for difficult to treat diseases.
Or you've just failed the generic alternatives.
Or you failed the generic alternatives. And so it's not to say that this isn't a problem, but it's a different sort of problem than I think we talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I know drug companies make most of their money off their on-patent drugs. They still make a little bit of money off of generics, but only about 10% of on-patent drugs. So they try to make all their money while for that period of time. And then they're planning their releases so that when that patent's running up, they have a couple of tricks to extend the patent. Like we did a different formulation, or now we have the sustained release. And then they have their next drug in the pipeline to replace it just as it goes off patent. So they're gaming the system that way. But at the other end, again, you have insurance companies, some of which is the government, they're gaming the system too. It's like, nope, you have to try this generic before we'll pay for the on-patent one. And that's reasonable. I say that's perfect. We should do that ourselves so that we're not forced to do it. And that's cost effective too. Because if we don't do that, someone's going to do it for us.
As a physician, did you try to go generic first?
Always. And not just generic first, because this also dovetails with old tried and true first, right? So I would start with a drug that's been out for 50 years, is off patent. Again, the fact that it's dirt cheap, which they often are, means that the patient's more likely to be compliant with it too. So it's an intention to treat kind of thing. It's more compliance, therefore it's more effective. And the patients will appreciate the fact that you're not giving them a drug that's going to cost 100 times as much as an older generic drug. And again, if that fails, you can always work your way up to the new drugs that maybe they will work, but you shouldn't start there.
Right.
Medical students often, they know about the new shiny drug and they're like, oh, we'll start with this. It's great. I heard all this great stuff about it. Yeah, okay, but let's start with, Advil.
Right.
That can, for a lot of people, that works just fine, and you can always work your way up to that. But that has to be taught. Right. And it isn't, I don't think, universally taught or taught enough.
Well, and I think this is probably a full, if not multiple episodes about politics and healthcare and policy and politics and healthcare and politics and health policy in the United States. But for now, I thought it was a nice picture that, averages are helpful and, summarizing central tendencies of a price or a trend, it can be very useful, but it can also leave out a really big part of the picture.
It does leave out a part of the picture, and it's often grossly misleading if all you give is the average, because then those outliers distort the average. It doesn't tell you what the median is.
Right.
What you really want to know sometimes, like what's the typical person paying, not what's the average.
Right.
Like the average American makes a lot of money, but that doesn't really tell you anything about income inequality.
Right. So, Steve, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this as well is that what we just talked about, that it's 3 times the price in the United States compared to Europe, that is not technically misinformation. It's factually correct. We just unpacked it a tiny bit and saw that it can be a little bit misleading, and there's more to it than that. But what we're about to learn from Josh Tucker is going to go even further and say that a lot of the things that we think about when we think of misinformation are not just, this thing that someone said that's wrong. It's often a lot more subtle. It's information that's maybe correct, presented in a different context, or it's information that's fully correct, but we choose not to believe it because of our own biases.
Are you saying there's a lot of misinformation about misinformation?
I think that might be what I'm saying.